Hello believers, how are you? Welcome to the podcast and happy Easter to you. Just speaking to you over the sound of a couple of birds fighting it out in a tree above me because spring has very much arrived here in Edinburgh. I'm not on a boat. I did want to be on a boat to continue the transport theme from the last couple of intros, but no, I'm out and about with the dog. Moose the dog, that is, the old Bedlington Whippet Italian Greyhound Cross. He's just scooting about, having a sniff around. He's off to the vets, sadly, on Monday. I say sadly, that's more me putting a kind of human spin on things because he is off to get spayed. Sorry about that, Moose. We've got to cut that bloodline off right there. But, you know, he'll get lots of love and attention when he gets back, and he'll probably be sporting one of those very fashionable cones around his head, so it's not all bad for him. He has been struggling to keep his emotions in check recently, a bit like every time I hear that bloody Max Richter daytime track. Gets me every time, really just sets something off in me. Anyway, get well soon to your Moose. Hope you had a good Friday anyway, and you made it through the cavalcade of probably dreadful April Fool's messages already today. And it's Easter as well, so please do follow the advice of the NHS and don't eat all your eggs in one go. I couldn't really decipher if that was because that was going to have kind of long-term damage on your body, or a kind of because it was a choking threat. You know, I'm not sure anybody eats an entire chocolate egg intact in one go. Anyway, all joking aside, we've got a great guest today on the podcast. It's I Love Lewis born, Edinburgh-based visual artist Emma Macleod. I first stumbled upon Emma's work at Open Studios in Edinburgh, and her particular studios was overflowing with unusual lifelike, but not life-size, limbs which were emanating from kind of furry cocoon-like bodies. We get into talking about that in the chat, so I'll not go into it too much now, but there's certainly an air of the absurd and uncanny to Emma's work that I was sure would give her a natural affinity to the X-Files. And for once I was right. On the chat, Emma talks about growing up on Lewis, theatre set designing, metamorphosis, spirituality, the Wicker Man, and being on the side of the community. And we of course get to speaking about X-Files Season 1, Episode 17 EBE. As always, if you like the show, please do leave a review, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, or drop me a line at believemepod@gmail.com. Follow us on X and Instagram. I've rejoined Facebook, but you know, I was on there for half an hour and the whole thing was stressing me out, so there is a Facebook page for this podcast now. You know, if you want to find it and have a chat with me, then please do. Yeah, there it is. Actually, what I did do is totally balls it up and set up a profile in the first instance, and realised I had to set up a page, and now I've asked the nice people at Meta if they can swap it over from a profile to a page, but I don't think I can do it because I've only been on so long. Life, innit? Anyway, I'm drivelling on here, and Emma's conversation is far more interesting than this, so I'll bid you adieu, enjoy the rest of your Easter, and I'll see you next time. I always like to sort of ask how everybody is. How are you in yourself at the minute?
Do you know what? I'm pretty good at the moment, which is really good. I feel like I can confidently say I feel pretty good, and that feels great.
That's nice. And what's sort of contributing to that, do you think?
I think I've had like a few years of not feeling so great, and I've suddenly realised I'm starting to feel a bit like myself, which which is really good. And I think it's partly just maybe a bit of a better balance in life at the moment. Creativity also sort of helps to make me feel good.
Yeah. Has it not been like that in the past then for you?
No. The last kind of like 4.5 years have been a little bit up and down, shall we say, for myself. I'm coming into sort of motherhood, and we've also been dealing with the COVID pandemic and these sort of things. Definitely affected my mental health.
Yeah. Did you find, how did you navigate that? Was it good to get out and get into a studio? Have you had that studio a while? Is that a new thing?
Yeah, so I've got a studio in Albion Road in Edinburgh. I've been there for about 5 years, and prior to that I had another studio in a great big old office building that was converted.
Right.
But studio space is quite important to me as a kind of visual artist, because I can be messy. I can be really messy in a studio. But for me also it's a kind of it's the mentality of going to a different space.
Sure, yeah.
And that sort of feels important, and it's my kind of creative space. It's my place to sort of escape. Makes it sound a bit whimsical.
No, I totally get that.
It's my place. It's my place to work, but it's also a place to just sort of be, to sort of create, to make, to kind of draw, create sculptures.
As how you approach your practice, has that altered over the years, or do you tend to? Oh, great! I'd love to hear about that.
So, I was just kind of reflecting on how my work has changed quite a lot. I mean, I've been a practicing artist for about 20. If I include the time that I studied, it's been about 20 years now. Actually more.
It creeps up on you, doesn't it?
Yeah, so it kind of creeps up on you, it sure does. So I've been practicing for a long time, and my work has changed a lot in that time. But there's always things that are a constant for me. I've always been really interested in small scale, playing on scale, model making, and then also things, bringing in ideas that are a bit unsettling.
Yes.
Or a little bit strange, or a little bit weird.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I kind of, when we came to the studio, that's what I was immediately hit by, this kind of, and I was looking at your website, and you use this word as well, this idea of the uncanny. It's familiar but not familiar at the same time. It's kind of struck me as, and I mean, I don't describe myself as I don't approach art in a kind of academic way. I didn't study art. So I'm kind of approaching things when I see a piece of art in a very kind of gut way, a sort of an emotional way rather than, with my head. But I know that was the feeling I immediately got when I walked in. It's like, this is really strange and unusual. And how was this person come to be making this, and but I was fascinated. I'd be interested to hear about how you got to the point you are now with it, with the sculptures, because I was looking back at some of your work on your website as well, and the video pieces, and I really, I found it unsettling but also really funny as well. I felt like there's a sense of humour through your work as well. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that's definitely fair to say. I like to bring in a playfulness to my work as well, which can sometimes come through as humour. So although I'm interested in things that kind of make you feel a little strange or a little unsettling, I'm really interested in this sort of playfulness and that sort of fine line between things being kind of humorous and a little bit weird.
Yeah. Well, I guess I was going to get on to asking you what your influences are in a way. I know that's a horrible question to ask an artist, but what's kind of contributed to where you are now? Are you like a sponge? Are you going through life thinking, oh, I'll have that bit and I'll have that bit, but as a kind of guiding artist you've seen that you've factored into your work at the moment?
I think the work that I've been making maybe over the last kind of 4 to 5 years has been a lot more personal than work that I've made previously. Maybe about 5 years ago, I created these little cocoons, very small scale work, and these little cocoons of little hands sort of creeping out of them.
Yeah.
And that was at that point I was actually pregnant. So it's interesting sort of looking back at that. And I was thinking, we were made a decision to have a child. And so that idea of metamorphosis and kind of changing, it sounds really literal when I say it like that, but it was this idea of things sort of emerging or kind of becoming, initially with that body of work. And those little cocoon sort of forms came from a project that I'd done prior to that, which was an outdoor installation friends and I had done in Edinburgh as part of Art Walk Porty. And we were at Meadows Yard, and we'd created a kind of walk that the public could follow, and we placed different sculptures, but they're all a little bit strange, like a nest with strange kind of bones in it. It was one of the things my friend made. And I made these cocoons that had tendrils coming out of them.
Yes, amazing.
And then also hanging from a tree were these cocoon type sort of forms. So sort of looking at nature. So that was kind of really fun and playful, and that's also where the cocoon form sort of came from, and this idea of sort of emerging and sort of coming out.
Do you imagine there's something in there though? I mean, when I look, I'll put a link to your work as well so people can see it. Do you imagine the rest of the bodies inside that cocoon? It's fluffy is the wrong word, but it's this kind of form with the arms, the very realistic arms and legs coming out of it. Do you imagine there's the rest of the body in there, or is that it? Is that a being in itself that's navigating the world?
Yeah. So these forms that I've been making lately, well, I say lately, again, they were kind of quite personal, and they started from I was reflecting on kind of new motherhood, feelings of being really exhausted, feelings of being like trapped and a little bit stuck. Yeah. So I made these really realistic limbs, and then I used felt. So there's no faces, but it's like these felted forms, which could be the bodies, with arms and legs kind of coming out of them, and they might be in positions where they're like kind of curled up in a fetal position, or they're kind of like arms standing up and arms hanging down, and they're really exhausted. I sort of imagine the bodies are inside, but the faces are covered and they're kind of trapped. But also, using felt, there's something comforting about the wool as well, but it's also a little suffocating. So it's this, that's some of the feelings I was kind of going for when making the work. Yeah,
that you essentially can't escape yourself in a way.
Yes.
If you look at these poor these poor creatures, and I love the poses that they find themselves in.
Yes, and definitely they were when I made them, I was my mental health wasn't great at that time. I made those pieces during lockdown, which was just 9 months into being a new parent for me as well.
Yeah.
I'd also been dealing with kind of birth trauma and things too. So my mental health really, really wasn't great. And I started making these because it was a material that I could work in, but also being creative, I started to figure was actually really great for my mental health, and it was helping me to kind of cope.
Great.
And sort of understand my feelings. So I started kind of sketching and started making these little models, just kind of partly because I needed to get back to being creative. My whole life had been consumed with being a new mum, but also during kind of lockdown.
Yeah.
I needed a focus. I needed something to kind of distract from all this, everything that was going on in the news, and just being able to kind of process my feelings.
How much did growing up in Lewis affect your practice and your outlook on life? And, at any point did that, when you were going through those things, did you think, I just need to get back to the isolation of Lewis? And is it I'm projecting there because I've never been to Lewis, but I just love to hear about you growing up there and any of your experiences and how that might have shaped you.
Yeah, growing up in Lewis is a beautiful part of the world. It's quite a barren kind of island. Beautiful beaches. There's not much natural trees and things as well. But I grew up in the town, so I actually grew up in a small town. So for me, it didn't feel so too isolated.
Sure.
But certainly growing up, you felt the difference in being cut off from the mainland and being like isolated in that respect. And also growing up in Lewis, religion was very strong, the kind of culturally.
And is it Christian Protestant, is it, on the island?
Yes,
right.
Yes, very much so. And whilst I was growing up, it's maybe less so now, but the church and the kind of Presbyterian church had a very strong influence on the island. So when I was growing up, they used to lock up the swings in the swing park on a Sunday because Sunday is the day of the Sabbath.
Well, I'm laughing, but wow, amazing.
Yeah, not allowed to hang out your washing. You shouldn't be watching the TV. The Sunday should just be a day kind of rest, but of holy rest.
Yeah.
Where you're going to church, praying, you're reading the Lord's words, that sort of thing.
Goodness.
So I went to church, but I went to the Salvation Army church growing up. So that was a little bit different. But yeah, I think it was interesting growing up in that respect, because I think as a young child, I very much kind of like had a faith and sort of believed in, had a kind of like faith, went to church, sort of believed in it. But as a teenager, my faith started to wane.
Right.
And there was just certain things that I didn't align with my kind of personal values.
Yeah. What sort of outside, I mean, what was affecting that then? Was it the influence of other things you were seeing, or watching on the TV, or friends, or that sort of thing? Yeah,
sort of friends. Also feeling like I had too much of an influence at that point, and as a young teenager, wanting to be able to do things at the weekend, wanting the island to be like the mainland.
Sure.
I wanted to be in the city.
Yeah.
I wanted to be able to kind of, go out and buy stuff or whatever. But now I'm older, I'm like, I think the idea of Sunday being a day of rest is amazing.
For it, yeah.
Yeah, like I'm kind of all for stuff sort of being closed down.
Yeah.
and having a quiet day.
I guess it's the option, isn't it? Because we used to live before we moved to Edinburgh, and I'm not saying Edinburgh's not a incredible metropolis, but we lived in London for many years, and it was just the option. I wasn't going to go out clubbing, but just having the option that I could.
Yes. Yeah. I think it was like not having the option was good, and I just I feel like there were some views that the church kind of had around people that I felt was a little bigoted.
Yeah.
Particularly around kind of LGBT kind of folk, which just really didn't align with my kind of values. But I think there's lots of changes in that respect now. We're talking about 20, 25, 30 years ago, you know? And I think there are sort of changes. There's certainly changes in the island. Like they let you go to the swing park now.
Progressive.
It's progressive. You still, I don't think the sports centre is open on a Sunday though.
Right.
Can't go for a swim.
Yeah. Well, I remember the outcry in Chesterfield when the shops started being open on Sunday past 12. And it was like, oh, the world's going to ruin. Shops are open. Yeah. I
mean, in some respect, I'm like, maybe it is gone to ruin. Like capitalism isn't great.
I always think when I see when I hear the Pope coming out with, I should caveat this that I'm a total heathen and I've got no religion whatsoever, but when I always see the Pope coming out with something, I always think there's something quite mercenary about how inclusive he is. It was almost like he's thinking of the church as a business and the future of the business and increasing the parishioners rather than he actually, love for all. And so there's an element to that in it. It's like we've got to think about the future rather than actually really listening to people from the LGBTQ plus community. But I know full well that there's different factions and sections of the church, and some are more progressive than the others.
Yes, but thinking about the isolation in Lewis and how it influences my work, I'll never be a landscape artist.
Right.
But I am interested in nature. I remember going to when I first went to art school, and I'd like arrived with some landscape kind of like drawings, and I remember my tutor being like, "You don't want to be a landscape artist. All the artists from the Western Isles do landscapes." That's not true. There's actually some amazing artists in the Western Isles, but such an amazing landscape does have an influence on you. And certainly, the kind of there's something about nature and the outdoors, and there is a kind of spirituality that comes with that. More recently, has kind of been playing into my work a little bit.
Yeah, I watched. What did I watch last night? This new J.A. Bayona film called Society of the Snow, about the Uruguayan plane crash in the 70s, the Christian rugby team who crashed in the Andes and but had to resort to eating the dead. Really good film. Ooh. Really harrowing plane crash in it, and just a remarkable story, really. But I was watching that, and they all got faith, they're all from a Christian background, and there's part of me where I was thinking that it kind of informed how they approached the whole situation. The fact they were in a team and there wasn't a kind of democracy there. It was like the captain's in charge, so we're doing what the captain says, but also an element of like, well, you're the fastest runner, Pablo, you'll be able to make it up this mountain and see if there's anything over the other side. So it totally removed any kind of democracy, but also like the fact that they all had this kind of faith there. You might, if you hadn't had it, then you might have given up at some point and gone, I just, there's nothing coming. There's no one's going to save us. And there's such a nice bit halfway through where one of the people who've been injured says, well, I see faith in Pablo's optimism, and I see faith in Nacho's legs at going up the mountain, and finding faith in those little bits rather than God on high, and blaming God for this plane crash has happened. And I thought it was such a nice spin on it to be able to find that sort of solace. I've gone off on a tangent too about a Netflix film, but
no, but it has made me reflect a bit on how would I describe myself. I don't think I'm an atheist,
right?
But I maybe, what's the other word?
Agnostic, is it?
Agnostic. Perhaps I'm agnostic.
Yeah.
I could perhaps be sort of convinced, or I believe in sort of having a faith can bring comfort. Or there's something about the community as well, I suppose, for a lot of folk. Faith also brings people together, but also having something else to sort of believe in, that there's more than what is just here in the immediate, can be really comforting for people. And I think I find that quite comforting as a thought.
Does that extend to, and by no means mean to liken faith to supernatural activity, but I'm going to, does that extend to you being open to, I was going to do a segue into X-Files chat then, but let's just stick on you for the minute. But I mean, are you open to, would you say you're a believer in, are you open to that side of things?
I am quite open to those side of things. I'm quite open to there being other beings elsewhere in this world, not in this, in this universe or outside of this universe. I'd like to believe that there's more. I mean, it feels more probable than not.
Yes.
If there's so much life on Earth, there has to be more life somewhere else, even if that's like microorganisms or something.
Yeah, no, totally.
But there's something kind of like comforting and also like unsettling about this idea of there being other beings elsewhere. Yeah,
I mean the sort of idea of ghosts troubles me.
Yeah. I think I kind of feel like life sort of ends, but I like the idea of people's people's spirits living within other folk or something. I don't mean like in a poltergeist way. I just mean like someone's been with you and they've affected you and been a part of your life, and their spirit is sort of still there, still in the ether, kind of like through the experiences that you've had.
I guess just back to that, one of the original questions was, you know, who you were watching growing up and who you were seeing and who you were influenced by, you know, maybe when you went to art school. Is there anyone that stands out that you saw their work and you thought, that's interesting and I want to learn more about that, and you've fed that into your own work? Or do you feel quite, you know, like you've talked about being influenced by nature, are you more interested in that side of things, or is there artists that you would always seek out to go and see their new work?
I think particularly sort of in art school, and I can see that influence throughout my work, was the work of an American artist, kind of Gregory Crewdson.
Oh, the photographer, yeah.
The photographer, right? That was he was really influential at the beginning of my career, and I think it was that very filmic, you know, the dramatic lighting, that kind of staged quality that I really, really liked, and that's definitely influenced my work. So when I was just graduating from art school, I was making these little models and like photographing them. They were really like film noir influenced, dramatic, sort of black and white, high contrast sort of light. So that sort of influence has really stayed with me, like creating sort of staged images or kind of staged scenarios. I mean, I haven't actually looked at his work in a long time.
No, I don't. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, though. It's something that sits halfway between like Edward Hopper and David Lynch, isn't it, in terms of how it looks, and a lot of suburban America, streets lit in a kind of that kind of orangey hue, and very film noir, like something's going on in the shadows there.
And definitely a sort of theatre has influenced my work.
Right.
Kind of theatre set design is something that I've looked at. I also worked in theatre for a while. Yeah,
because you've got one of the drawings on your website is, you know, it looks like the inside of a theatre. So
yeah, I worked in theatre for a theatre company, and kind of I've worked in the performing arts alongside my visual arts practice. And I worked for a theatre company doing and I also work for a kind of performing arts company that produces festivals.
Right.
That's my day job. That's my steady job that gives me income. And so I've always worked in the performing arts, and that's always really influenced my work in different ways. Theatre, particularly years I was working for a theatre company, I was doing like arts admin. That's what I still do, arts admin.
Yeah.
It's not very creative.
Well, I mean, everybody's got to have 10 jobs these days, haven't they, to facilitate your process?
Yeah, exactly. Always juggling. But yeah, no, the theatre working, you know, we'd have like a set designer come in, and we'd be working with the designer and seeing the kind of models. I just absolutely loved that. And then sort of seeing it progress onto the stage, and the kind of lighting, like these sort of the aesthetic side of the theatre really kind of influenced me. So I was doing kind of paintings about sort of staged environments.
Yeah.
And then also bringing in sort of lighting and taking photographs. I was actually taking quite a lot of photographs at that time as well, and making small sets or small models and then photographing them.
What do you think it is about the theatre then? Because how you were talking about the theatre space, it's almost like having control of I guess control's a wrong word, because it feels like you're breathing down people's necks, but being able to mould a small space, everything in that space can be defined by you, rather than, again, like you were saying about the landscape, being a landscape artist, someone who thinks about landscape, it just seems so big as a concept, you know, to deal with. That maybe there's something in like having this defined theatrical space that everything you do can be factored into that space. That's just a statement rather than a question. But,
so. No, I definitely like control.
Yeah.
Control over the work that I'm making.
Yeah, I nearly went. I was like, "Are you a control freak?" And then I stopped. Stop yourself.
No, I yes. I like to feel in control of what's going on in my life.
I think we all do. Yeah,
I think we all do. But no, it's definitely a trait of mine. One could define me as a control freak. But I think in terms of my art practice, I like to be in control. I like to, particularly thinking about the staged environment, being in control of the lighting and and the feelings that you might want to portray through your work.
Yeah. Is there, your kind of day-to-day work, is there anything that do you get to a point where you feel frustrated in the day, and how do you kind of navigate that, and at what point do you find the most satisfying in the process? Is it the actual making of the work, or is it when you're displaying it at the end, or are they both similar in terms of how you feel?
So it's funny when you say the phrase day-to-day work, because like many artists, I feel like I'm juggling lots of different things. So I'm working a steady job, I'm taking care of my child, and I'm trying to fit an art practice in. So actually, the thing that's most frustrating about my art practice at the moment is not having much time. I'd love to have more time, to be able to see through the ideas. But the things that is most satisfying is maybe I've got an idea, and often my ideas will come from being in the shower.
Yeah.
I'll be like in the shower and I get really lost in my thoughts, and I like to draw in the shower.
Oh, right.
Like draw on the glass. Like as you did as a kid and stuff.
Yeah.
Like I love sort of drawing in the shower, and I just process some of my thoughts there. And then maybe at some point that'll make its way into a little quick sketch into my sketchbook. And I'll be maybe thinking about how can I make that into an actual thing. So the most satisfying thing is having ideas sort of sketched out and then seeing it right through to the end.
Yeah.
Often it'll be a bit different. I can be quite self-critical, but then I also try to sort of take a step back and be like, well, rather than being like, oh, that's terrible, it's not exactly how I imagined. I like to think of, okay, well, this is part of the process, and the physical making brings a different kind of like element, and you have to work with the materials, go with the flow a little bit.
That's nice that you can let it go, rather than continually, not being unsatisfied with one particular piece.
I think as an artist, I can only speak for myself, but if I become too bogged down in everything being like perfect or the best piece of art I'm going to make, I would never make anything.
Sure.
It would just be too soul destroying. I like to think of art as being a practice. It's like you just keep going and you plug away, and some things work and some things don't, and you just have to keep going.
I mean, what are you working on at the moment? Are you working towards something, another exhibition, or are you continuing making the sculptures, or is there some kind of goal you're working to at the moment?
So at the moment, I'm in a little hiatus moment. It's a new year.
Nice.
I want to make some new work. But I have a couple of exhibitions coming up. I'm showing some existing work at Visual Art Scotland.
Great.
Which is an open exhibition that's in Edinburgh. So I'm looking forward to that. It's nice to get work that you've made kind of out there and people to see it. Yeah. So I've got some finalising that I need to do of the work that's going into that show. Like I need to make sure that I made these island kind of like tree-like sort of plinths. I need to make sure they're quite stable. Yeah. So a bit of that will just today, later on in the studio, I'm going to be trying to work out how to make those like really super stable. And then potentially got another exhibition coming up in May with some other figurative artists
Right.
in Edinburgh. So that's a little bit sort of up in the air. We'll see how that goes. But I've been asked if I would put in. I've been making these little sculptures, which I think is actually the one that you have.
I do. It's on our wall. Yeah.
Yeah. So these little plaster kind of like squares or forms, and they've got little kind of like hands coming out of them. A little bit like, maybe is there hands coming out of the wall, or is it just a light switch? Lots of people tell me they look like light switches.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be making more of those. I'm quite interested in making some sort of wall works where it's almost like a little body is coming out of the wall, kind of.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Yeah, I was really drawn to those little hands. It reminded me of a couple of things. It reminded me of, this is a funny thing, but Day of the Dead, the George A. Romero film, where there's a kind of nightmarish opening to that, where the lead character is in a bunker, turns around, looks at the calendar, and then all these hands shoot out of the wall, and it's really one of the most terrifying things in real life.
That sounds great.
And I guess it almost like almost a bit Polanski as well. But I love that, because every time people walk in the house, they point it out and say, that's very strange, and what's going on there, and they can't quite get their head around it, which is fantastic.
Yeah, it's really funny. I had Open Studios in November, which is when you came to my studio, and I made them specifically for Open Studios because people really are quite drawn to my sculptures. It's Open Studios is quite like, it's quite a thing to do. You're like opening people into your space. You're like, hey, come to your space.
Yeah.
But you get really immediate reactions from people in a way that you don't get if you're in a gallery, because you might not necessarily be sat in the gallery, but you're sat in your studio, this space where you make work, and you're inviting people in. And the immediate reactions are great. Like, some people were like, oh, I'm not sure how I feel about these. And then other people find my work quite endearing.
Yeah.
I had one woman say to me, do your parents ever worry where they went wrong?
That's superb.
So that was really hilarious. But, you get these kind of like gut sort of reactions from people.
That's, oh my goodness me.
Which is really interesting. Yeah, so some people find my work really strange. I don't think it's that strange. Maybe that's because I make it.
Well, it immediately stood out to the rest of the stuff, the other artists that were in, I just didn't, was not expecting to see something I liked and found as interesting, and that's maybe my snobbery, but
these little hands, I made them thinking, they could, I've never really gone down a route of trying to sell my work.
Right.
Having a steady job was being a purposeful kind of decision, so that I didn't have the pressure of trying to make work that would sell to be able to make an income.
Yeah.
But this was the first time I made these little hands, thinking, I don't know, I kind of think people could maybe live with those. So I kind of made them just as a wee sort of trial, and they were really popular, kind of like at Open Studios. I think they're kind of like, they're enough, if someone's a little kind of like into slightly strange stuff, they're enough to put on the wall without being too weird.
Yeah, I think that's the sort of straddles the, commercial art versus something you'd see in a gallery really well, because it totally works in both contexts. Yeah,
so it's been it was interesting making those, and they're kind of like an open edition, so they're quite different to maybe the one-off pieces. There's lots of people that kind of like influence me, or I'm really kind of interested in them. But actually what's driving me at the moment in terms of Edinburgh and what I've seen is like a sense of community between artists. So a friend of mine has set up a really great artist studios and gallery space on Leith Walk called Sett Studios.
All right, yeah.
And it's a really fun place. They make like my friend is called Abby Lewis. She's absolutely brilliant, like a fun person to be around, and she's got energy that I've never encountered in anybody else. And she's so enthusiastic, really encouraging to artists, but also really loves lo-fi fun art.
Great.
And I feel really kind of like influenced by that a lot. She's invited me to be part of like group exhibitions, and some of them have been around folklore and ideas around sort of myth. And so back in October, she organised this exhibition. It was influenced by the Wicker Man. So the artists were invited to make a work influenced by the Wicker Man.
Fantastic.
Which was really fun. And I always find these projects where there's a specific kind of slightly strange kind of brief that I then make something that's related to the work that I do, but also a little bit different, and it can take me into different directions.
Super.
But yeah, so we did this exhibition influenced by the Wicker Man, and then people got dressed up, and we did like a procession along Leith Walk.
Oh my goodness.
With like experimental kind of musicians and stuff as well, like stopping at different places. And this year there was Susie Cunningham, amazing Buto dancer based in Edinburgh.
Right.
She's really influenced my work quite a lot. So she had like a performance. Then we went to Settlement Projects, which is a junk shop in Leith. I say junk shop, second-hand shop in Leith Walk, and there was like different musicians playing there. But it's a real kind of sense of community, of bringing people together and having fun through art.
Yeah.
And like trying to sort of, art can be a bit, I can't really be done with the high art side of the art world. It just doesn't feel right. It doesn't sit right within my kind of like who I am and my kind of values. And this sense of like community, local, bringing other artists together just to have a bit of fun together sometimes, have a bit of a party, make some art, encourage each other to be creative is really lovely.
That's great. I love that about that was based around the Wicker Man as well, because that's what I always got from the Wicker Man was that it's a nice community, isn't it? And it's the policeman that's the one in the wrong. It's like Edward Woodward coming in and like shaking stuff. Yeah, burn him. Get that guy out of the way.
Yeah.
That's me. That's great. That's really exciting to hear. And she's it's really great, the stuff that they're doing. It's not just Abby, there is a community of folk kind of running that space and making stuff happen, but Abby feels very central to it. I mean, what would you say is your relationship with X-Files then? Have you always been a fan of it? I know in your message you mentioned about your granddad, but when did you first kind of come across it?
I first came across it as a kid because my grandfather used to watch it, and so every second, it used to be on a Sunday, and my grandparents had Sky, which felt super fancy because it was
posh.
More than 4 channels. Oh my god. It felt really posh, right? It was super fancy. And so we used to go and stay with my grandparents like every second weekend. It was the grandparents on my mum's side, and we would watch the X-Files. It was just part of our routine, and he would whistle the theme tune so loudly, like ear-piercingly loudly, because he thought it was, he loved the tune, but also he did it to kind of annoy you. He used to like whistle really, really loudly, but it's such an iconic sort of theme tune. And then after we'd sit and we'd maybe watch the X-Files. I wouldn't say I avidly watched it every week. I probably did some playing and other things. And then he'd take us in his car after it finished, and he'd drop us off at home, and he'd play ELO really loudly in the car on the way up. So it was just a real part of my kind of like weekend routine kind of with my grandparents was watching the X-Files. So when you got in touch, I was like, God, I've not watched the X-Files. probably since I was a kid.
Oh, great.
But it had such kind of fond memories of being a kid.
What was it like coming back to watch this particular episode then?
It's funny coming back and watching it, isn't it? Because obviously I started thinking about my granddad when I'm watching it.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're kind of watching it being like, oh, that's aged a bit. Or you're like, oh, this has aged quite well, actually.
Yeah.
Watching it, though, I got particularly excited about the aesthetic of it.
Yes,
and
right.
I'd kind of forgotten that aspect of the aesthetic sort of style.
It's very damp, isn't it?
Yeah.
A lot of it's very damp. I should say this episode we're talking about is season 1, episode 17, which is EBE, which we can get on to what that stands for. But it starts with the kind of, we know it's going to be about aliens this episode because it starts with a shot of the sky, and then we're into Iraqi airfighter territory, and an Iraqi airfighter shoots down what might be a UFO, and then we kind of cut to the States where something's crashed in a woods. It's always a woods, never the centre of town. But there's a rather not particularly impressive fireball comes out of this woods, and then we get the iconic credits come up then. But yeah, it does look good, doesn't it? Still, it looks good in terms of how they shot it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely got that kind of film noir aesthetic that we were talking about earlier that I really quite like the dramatic lighting lit from the back, long shadows, and especially that scene that stuck with me the most kind of visually is it Deep Throat kind of walking off in the distance, the kind of silhouette with the kind of mist around, that kind of film noir, kind of dreamy, nightmare-y feel. I was really excited about the aesthetic of it, and I think that's because I've always really liked that kind of really dramatic, very staged kind of lighting.
Yeah, it's I mean, it doesn't really do too much to progress the story this episode. It's just tone. It's all tone, and it's sort of, you don't really learn too much more about what the aliens can or can't do. It's very, I think the writers on this one are Morgan and Wong, and they were very inspired by All the President's Men. You can sort of see that a bit, and almost like when Mulder's tearing up his apartment, it's very Gene Hackman in the conversation as well. It's like, is he being bugged?
Yeah.
Is this all a figment of Mulder's imagination as well? What did strike me rewatching this, because I mean, I've not watched them for a long time, but then I usually sit down and watch them just to enjoy it, and then I'll re-watch them before I speak to you. This what stood out is like Scully's got this massive townhouse, and Mulder's living in a really pokey apartment. It's like they must be on the same money. It's not been docked, his wage, and also having to, work in a terrible basement office in FBI headquarters. But I was like, maybe she's got money. I suppose her dad died earlier, didn't he, in the series? So maybe she's got some inheritance coming in.
It's like they're putting it there to say that she's more sophisticated than him, right? She's the science one, and so she's more credible, perhaps. So maybe that's what they're trying to portray through her fancy apartment.
She's she's definitely coming round to Mulder's way of thinking in this one a bit.
Well, I mean, she kind of has to, right? She was there. She saw it.
Yeah, there's some of the earlier episodes, there's still about element of doubt. It's like you could be clobbered over the head with an alien and still, I don't know, Mulder, don't know. And I guess with this one, we get an introduction of the Lone Goodman as well, who I was really excited to see them, because they kind of also bolster this. Well, they make Mulder more credible in a way, because they're so outlandish, and they kind of they go straight in with, the first time we meet them is one of them's talking about JFK, one of them's talking about something to do with someone in Russia's being placed in as a sort of as a puppet dictator. And I was like, you wouldn't, I mean, that's entry level conspiracy theories, isn't it? When they be, I'm not sure they'd be talking about that, or maybe it's like to sort of show off for when because Scully's there. But I really, what do you have memories of them in particular?
I don't have lots of like strong memories around. I guess it's more the family kind of emotional memories that I have, as opposed to the specific kind of like storylines. And I kind of hadn't remembered those guys, and you had mentioned to me about it's the first time the lone gunmen, is that what they're called, the lone gunmen, appear?
That's right, yeah.
And now I can see why they're quite exciting. And I was talking to my partner, who seems to be rewatching all of the X-Files kind of currently, and I've managed to like not really engage with him watching this. And he was like, "Oh yeah, that's the one where they first appear."
Lovely stuff.
And he said there was a spin-off series with them.
That's right. I never watched that. I never watched it. There was what was the other one? Well, it wasn't a spin-off, but there was a show called Millennium as well, which had like Lance Henriksen and Chris Carter did, and they had a crossover episode. But yeah, that's funny that he's watching it.
Yeah, he's been watching. He kind of watches it as a kind of comfort thing, and then seems to go to sleep watching it sometimes. Nice. I thought they were interesting characters, the lone gunmen. There was one that looked like the guy from Wayne's World, is what I thought. Yeah,
and I've got a random fact about him. So his name is Dean Hagland, and he's actually, we've reclaimed this word. He's a nerd in his own right. He invented something called the Chill Pack, which is a commercial external cooling product for laptop computers. So well done, Dean.
Wow.
On that. I love the fact that the sort of casting process for X-Files as well is just like, just find a nerd. They can come and play themselves. I love that. And the other one as well, the one with glasses, Mulder tells him off for calling Scully hot at one point. That's sort of the first time where someone's actually said she's good looking. Yeah. The rest of the time, it's almost like you get that Fire episode.
I think the fact that he called her hot was one of the things that kind of irked with me in the episode a little bit. Yeah. As though that's really super frowned upon. I mean, in general, but especially kind of like now, to talk to women in that sort of way.
Yeah, she sort of just rolls her eyes, doesn't she?
Yeah.
But she. I guess if it was written today, there might be more of a taking him to task of putting him in his place a bit.
Yeah, I think so. That definitely felt like something that had aged a little, kind of within it.
Yeah, because Mulder makes a joke about it afterwards as well, doesn't he? It's like, oh, come on, Scully.
Yeah. But what was interesting is I'm following that, and then Scully finds like in the pen.
Oh yes, the bugging device.
Yes,
yeah.
where Scully finds the bugging device, and it makes them a little more credible as characters.
Yeah, I liked it. Apparently they were based on people the writers actually met at a UFO convention.
Right,
I think that's fantastic. It's wild to me that there's actual UFO convention as well, and that's, why would there not be? It's wonderful. And the guy with glasses from the Lone Gunman, he was actually also just the series' assistant director. So he wasn't even cast, he was just walking past the casting office.
Oh, right.
And they went... Tom Braidwood. He's just walking past and they went, Tom, come in here, you can do this. And then that's it. It's just like, you're in the show. Absolute madness.
And then it ended up in the show for quite a while then.
Yeah. They came. I think they did so well. People liked them so much that after this, they just became kind of reoccurring part. And it's quite nice. It's sort of like, like you say, it lends an air of sort of credibility to the whole thing. I did actually quite like, because I watched it the first time and thought, this is quite a boring episode, nothing's happening. And then I watched it again this morning about 6:30 when the kids got up, and I was really invested in it. I was like, the paranoia, what's going to happen? Is Mulder and Scully going to get shot? Is like, what's happening with Deep Throat? Is he basically just playing them, like a puppet the entire way through, and producing the world's worst faked photograph?
Oh, yeah. I've spotted the moon. I thought that was great.
He was like, we've had our best minds. I'm surprised you figured that out was a fake, because we've had best. Have you? You've had your best minds create that.
Like, really? That's your best minds?
Yeah. And there was some good. There was some quite nice lines in it, actually. I mean, Mulder says, Scully says the truth's out there, and then she says, but so are lies. So, I mean, that's kind of the entire series encapsulated. And then this kind of point where one of them says, I don't know why the government conspiracy theories don't just kill us, And so it's almost like addressed because the audience is definitely thinking, why, this is a lot of effort to go to. They could just shoot Mulder and Scully and have done with it if they want to cover it up so much. So I kind of enjoyed that being addressed. But it's quite a fun episode in the end, actually, even though it kind of didn't go anywhere or didn't, really sort of progress the story.
Yeah,
really.
I like the use of the phrase extraterrestrial biological entities.
Yes, that's what it stands for. EBE, yeah, the title of the episode. That's great. Yeah,
extraterrestrial biological entities. Like, I've never heard that phrase before. Is that actually a phrase that's used outside of like?
I seriously doubt it.
Yeah, that was the kind of feeling that I got from it. But it was said with such conviction, like of a true believer. It really kind of stuck out for me.
I also liked the fact that Mulder and Scully just got on a coach at one point. Didn't hire a car. It's just, FBI needs to save a bit of cash.
So they're just going to get the bus.
Yeah, get on the bus, cross state. It'll be gone by the time you get there.
Yeah, when they're like meant to be following something.
Yeah.
Well, let's just get on the bus.
I really like that. Do you think you'll join your husband, your partner, in watching some more of the show now? Has it galvanised you?
I kind of feel like maybe it has. Yes. Although he's in season whatever, like miles ahead.
Oh, he's binging it, is he? Right.
Yeah, he's pretty much watched it every night for like months now, I think.
That's good.
But he tends to put it on when I'm like, right, I'm off to bed or we're kind of out and about doing stuff. But I thought the character of is it Deep Throat?
That's his name.
That's
his problematic name.
It's a strange name. But that aside, so he was at the end. I thought it was interesting about his reasoning. It was for kind of being involved or getting Mulder involved.
Yeah, this whole thing about hiding the truth between two lies. It's just a lot of effort, isn't it? And it's almost like he's every episode that he's in, he's handing Mulder another piece of evidence.
Right.
Should it be just less risky to just tell him, unless, especially if they're out in the open and they just avoid getting bugged or what have you, then if you're flapping around bits of like government documents, then surely you're more likely to get caught that way. I just didn't know. I just can't remember what his. I know where the character ends up, but I couldn't really what his intentions are really, other than he sort of wants to help Mulder find the truth, but not really.
Yeah, like I, as somebody who's not kind of watched the episodes prior to this, I was kind of curious about his character. Like, why is he doing this?
Yeah, I don't have an answer for you.
Yeah.
Other than it's a sort of a plot progression thing.
Yes, but, that was the feeling I got from this episode, that it was more of a kind of building on the kind of central kind of storylines.
Yeah, because he turns up at Mulder's apartment, doesn't he? It's like almost one scene after the next, and you usually just have Deep Throat in one scene per episode.
Right.
But he's definitely integral to this. And then I guess you do have that nice scene where Mulder and Deep Throat are at the shot of the aquarium looking at the shark tank, and there's a bit of a kind of hackneyed metaphor about if a shark stops swimming then it dies. And you go, yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, but that's nice that you're I don't know, it's best to just pick and choose. I always think it's like I've kind of been a bit random how I'm watching it. I sometimes say, I'll watch the Fluke Man one, and then I'll watch that one that got banned, and you go, where are Mulder and Scully in the story now, and are they together, are they not together? And so,
you definitely feel the kind of tension. There's an underlying tension with them, isn't there?
What are you up to for the rest of the day?
I am going into my studio.
Nice.
I've currently got some little feet baking away in the oven.
Yes. Yes.
So they should be finished. They should be, all kind of firmed up. And then I'm going to try and make these very precarious plinths a little more balanced.
Sure, fantastic.
Yeah, so need to get them. Just make sure they're stable and don't fall over.
Yeah. Or just set up a video camera and then, that can form part of the piece, can't it? People precariously avoiding knocking over this remarkable artwork. Believe Me is written and edited by me, Chris Boyd, with production support from Steve Marshall. The music is by Johnny Boyle, and our logo is by Russ Brown. See you out there next time.